Vicky's time. Don't come around.
This is the story of a gang that wasn't born in a housing project or a prison yard, but at a little neighborhood restaurant in the east side of Los Angeles. A place where kids sat in cracked vinyl booths, shared plates of food, and kicked it on the sidewalk until the nickname for that spot turned into the name of an entire barrio. A name that would end up on walls in Stockton, San Jose, Tulare, and Kings County farm towns, Las Vegas, and even all the way down in Oaxaca, Mexico. This is the story of Vicky's town. The camera opens on Boyle Heights in the mid-1970s. Freeways cutting through the neighborhood, rows of small houses and apartments jammed along narrow streets. Big names are already carved into the landscape: White Fence, Big Hazard, State Street, the Maravillas, Fickett Street. These barrios go back generations. Kids grow up already knowing who controls what block, which alleys are safe, which ones aren't. A few blocks off East First Street, there's a small neighborhood joint people know simply as Vicky's. Depending on who you ask, it gets remembered as a burger stand, a little diner, a drive-in spot. What matters isn't the exact menu, it's what the place becomes. For the teenagers in that era, Vicky's is a magnet. After school, on weekends, late at night, you've got groups of homeboys and homegirls hanging around out front, posted on the sidewalk, leaning against cars, slipping in and out of the door. They're not a gang yet, they're just the kids who are always at Vicky's. According to people who came up in that scene, the owner doesn't chase them off. As long as nobody is tearing the place up too bad, they're allowed to hang out inside, grab food, linger over sodas they probably took too long to finish. That simple act of not throwing the kids out creates a home base. Pretty soon, the streets around that restaurant start getting a nickname. Where you at? I'm over here at Vicky's. I'm from over by Vicky's, from Vicky's town. Out of a corner hangout, a neighborhood identity takes shape. The kids who grew up around that restaurant start to see themselves as something separate from the bigger, older barrios. They're not Hazard, not White Fence, not Fickett. They're the youngsters from this little pocket, from Vicky's town. As the late 70s roll into the early 80s, that nickname hardens into a hood. The boys who were just hanging out at the drive-in are now carrying themselves as a barrio. They start writing it on walls, Vicky's town, VST. They're jumping in their own, creating their own rules. And like almost every neighborhood in that part of Los Angeles, they fall under the southern side of the line. They are a Sureño gang. In that era, being a Sureño in East LA is more than just colors. It means following a southern program in county and in prison, answering to a set of unwritten rules coming down from older homies and shot callers. It means claiming the number 13. Vicky's town isn't the biggest or the oldest hood in Boyle Heights, but inside its own little pocket, it matters. To a kid coming up on those streets, your world might literally be a handful of blocks. The school, the liquor store, the bus stop, and that restaurant that gave your barrio its name. Life in that part of East LA in the 80s looks like this. Lowriders cruising by with oldies and funk pouring out the windows, kids playing on sidewalks, mothers hustling between jobs, cops rolling slow looking for any excuse to hit the lights. If you're a teenager in Vicky's town, you're on constant alert. Who's driving that car? Who's crossing that alley? Who just tagged that wall? And it's not just the guys. One of the clearest public glimpses into early VST culture comes from a late 90s documentary that follows two sisters from East LA who claim Vicky's town. They talk about growing up around that name, how the barrio is woven into family and friendships, how girls don't just stand on the sidelines, they're getting jumped in, holding weapons, taking the same risks, and carrying the same trauma when things go bad. For the kids in that generation, the line between home life and gang life is thin. Your cousins, your older brother, your neighbor, those might be the ones repping VST before you ever do. On the walls, you see roll calls: Victor, Cyclone, Smiley, Puppet. Street names and block names, often written next to that VST tag and a 13. But Vicky's town is not alone on those hills. The same streets and alleys that VST claims are also crisscrossed by another small barrio called Fickett Street, and a newer presence that starts out as a tagging crew. KAM, Crazy Ass Mexicans. Cam begins like so many LA crews do, kids with markers and spray cans, bombing walls, buses, and freeways, trying to get their name up as far and wide as they can. To the old school barrios, they're just taggers. Annoying maybe, but not serious. As Cam grows, the older hoods around them, Fickett Street and Vicky's Town, feel they can't let that stand. That's how it usually goes in LA. Graffiti crews either get humbled or get absorbed. But in this case, the script flips. Instead of folding, KAM fights back. They start arming up. They stop being just taggers and start behaving like a full-blown gang. Little by little, the beef between KAM, Fickett Street, and Vicky's Town escalates. You've got crossed-out tags, drive-bys, alley fights, kids getting shot walking home. The exact details change depending on who tells the story, but they all point in the same direction. A small tagging crew refuses to be bullied and ends up taking over. Cam pushed out both steadfast gangs, taking over the whole neighborhood. In other words, the two established barrios, Fickett Street and Vicky's Town, lost much of their home ground to a crew that originally came up with spray cans instead of guns. For VST, that loss is huge. You've got homies who poured their whole identity into this barrio, and now their walls are getting hit by another name. Their hangout spots are no longer theirs. Some stay and keep fighting, trying to keep Vicky's Town alive on whatever corners they can hold. Others do what thousands of working-class families in East LA are doing at the same time. They move. They move east into the Inland Empire. They move north into the Central Valley and the Bay Area. They move out of state, Vegas, the Northwest, the South. And the name they carry with them, in their heads, on their hats, on their paperwork and tattoos, is Vicky's Town. Zoom out to the late 70s and early 80s. California's prison system is cementing a hard line between North and South. If you're locked up from a Southern California barrio, you ride with the Sureños. If you're from the northern counties, you ride with the Norteños. That split isn't just inside. It bleeds out into the streets, especially in cities like Stockton and San Jose, where Mexican and Chicano kids from different parts of the state are suddenly living side by side. Vicky's Town arrives in that world as a Los Angeles export. The clearest story we have from the early Stockton chapter comes from a kid named Rocky Rontal, whose life was later written about in a long magazine feature. Rocky grows up in South Stockton in the late 1970s. His home life is brutal, an alcoholic father, constant violence inside the house. Outside, he finds some kind of refuge in neighborhood kids, petty trouble, and eventually a small crew of his own. In those first years, Stockton doesn't yet have the same kind of LA gang map. There are rough areas, local crews, but the Norteño-Sureño grid hasn't totally hardened. That changes when a crew from Los Angeles moves up. They call themselves Vicky's Town. Rocky remembers hearing that they're from LA, that they're Sureños. To some of the local kids, they seem glamorous in the worst kind of way. They've got a certain style, a certain swagger, and they use the South's prison and street politics as a battering ram. Where Rocky's crew sees themselves as neighborhood kids, these new arrivals see themselves as soldiers in a larger Southern cause. At first, they try to recruit him. One night, 3 VST kids, one of them a youngster with green eyes known as Chewy, catch Rocky slipping near his home. They jump him. He manages to fight back and escape into his house. That beating is an attempted recruitment and a message. Either you roll with Vicky's Town, or you get rolled over. Rocky chooses option 3. He refuses. From that point on, every interaction between his circle and VST is on site. The tension builds through parties and sidewalks and schoolyards. Some nights it's fists, other nights there are guns. In one scene, Rocky later describes VST and his group cross paths at Stribley Park, a spot that's supposed to be for kids and families. Instead, it turns into another showdown. Rocky's little sister gets dragged into the chaos. The park becomes part of the war. Back at home, his mother's house becomes a target too. At one point, Chewy shows up at their front door looking to confront him. It's one thing to fight at a park, another to bring that heat to his mom's living room. That, in Rocky's mind, crosses a line. He takes a car one night, a sawed-off shotgun lying flat across the front seat. He drives to the house where he's told Chewy is staying. It's early. The sky is still dark. He walks up to the door and knocks. Chuy answers. In the dimness of that early hour, with members of Chuy's family behind him, Rocky raises the shotgun and fires. The blast kills the 16-year-old on the spot. The house fills with screams. Just like that, the beef between a local kid and a Los Angeles transplant turns into a murder case. Rocky is arrested, tried, and sentenced to 27 years to life. Years later, speaking from prison and then from the outside as an intervention worker, he looks back at that moment as the pivot point between two completely different lives, the moment a single decision born out of anger and pride erased both his future and Chuy's. But on the streets, what people see is that Stockton now has LA-style gang politics. Sureños and Norteños. Vicky's town as one of the first imported Southside names. The South Side of Stockton, which once had crews but no strong outside banners, now has a piece of East LA sprayed on the walls and written into its murder files. While Stockton is dealing with that first wave, another branch of the VST story is playing out farther west in the Bay Area. San Jose, the self-named capital of Silicon Valley, is also the capital of something else, one of the biggest Mexican and Central American populations in Northern California. Among those migrants, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, are thousands of people from the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. You see them in East and downtown San Jose, in apartment complexes, small houses, and storefront businesses. One of those businesses is a little Mexican restaurant called Casa Vicky, near North 17th and East Julian Street. It becomes known for its Oaxacan-style food and its role as a community hub. Families from villages like Pueblo Victoria and other Oaxacan towns gather there. They find familiar flavors, familiar accents, familiar music. Now imagine you're a kid growing up in that world. Your parents crossed the border or traveled north looking for work. You're going to school in San Jose, but your cousins might be in East LA, or already in the system, or living in farm towns like Tulare and Kings County. For some of those kids, the name Vicky's Town becomes a bridge. A former VST member named Henry Ortiz later tells a reporter that the gang he grew up in around San Jose's east and south sides wasn't born there. He says plainly, Vicky's Town was founded in East Los Angeles, and then expanded up to the east and south bay of San Jose and all the way down into Oaxaca, Mexico. For the kids in his generation, that meant you could be from a San Jose block and still carry an LA identity. You weren't just repping some local crew. You were repping a barrio that, at least in legend, came straight from Boyle Heights. For Oaxacan youth, it was layered. You had the village ties your parents talked about, the Mexican state you came from, the San Jose street you lived on, and on top of that, a gang name with roots in East LA. On the walls, that complexity shows up as tags like VST SanJo, VST 13, Pueblo Victoria, and shoutouts to both California area codes and Oaxacan numbers. In photos from the 1970s and 1980s, you see homegirls and homeboys flashing Southside signs while also representing small Oaxacan towns that most Americans have never heard of. At the same time, the Norteño-Sureño split is tightening all around them. Northern California, especially places like San Jose, is largely considered Norteño territory. Red rags, northern stars, the number 14. If you're a Mexican kid in San Jose, the default expectation, especially from the Norteño side, is that you'll run red. A Sureño identity is seen as not just different, but as an invasion. That puts VST homies in the middle. Inside the prisons, when lines get drawn, guys who have some connection to Vicky's Town in NorCal are forced to choose. The story you heard from your insider about some VST-connected guys in Northern California prisons having to stand with the red or stand with the blue is how that plays out in real life. If you choose blue, you stay Sureño. You might still call yourself Vicky's Town, but you're a small southern island inside a northern system. If you choose red, you're done with the sur. You may claim a Norteño barrio, maybe even rebrand as a northern barrio with roots in your old neighborhood, but you're no longer VST in the southern sense. That's why, in later years, some people in San Jose talk about Vicky's Town like it turned Norteño, while others insist it stayed sur. The truth is messier, Individuals split. Some repped blue, some went red, a few walked away entirely. The letters on the wall stayed the same, but the politics underneath changed depending on where you were locked up and who you ran with. As families from Los Angeles and the Bay Area look for cheaper rent and agricultural work, more and more of them land in the Central Valley, the long strip of land in the middle of California, full of orchards, dairies, and fields. That's how the Vickystown name ends up in places like Tulare County and Kings County. In cities like Visalia, Tulare, Hanford, and Lemoore, the local police and sheriff's departments maintain lists of active gangs for training and gang units. In those lists, VST, Vickystown, shows up alongside names of more locally born sets. It's officially recognized as a Sureño gang operating in those areas. On the street level, that looks like young guys in the 559 area code tagging VST13 on the sides of stores and in alleys behind apartment buildings. Some of them come from families who passed through Los Angeles or San Jose. Others might have relatives still in Oaxaca or Guerrero. The Vickystown identity for them is one more layer added on top of being a farm kid, a student, a son, a worker. Tulare County has had its share of cases with VST tied in. In one 2008 case, 2 young men are riding around Visalia. The driver later testifies that both of them claim Vickystown. They're not just cruising, they're actively looking for someone from a rival side to catch slipping. They pass a grocery store and spot a car they think belongs to an enemy. They circle, argue about what to do, and then the passenger opens fire. A man is shot and killed in front of his friend and his community for something that started as an idea in a car. Let's go look for someone. In the courtroom, the driver, now facing decades in prison, spells out for the jury what VST means to him. He admits the membership. He confirms the Sureño identity. And with every answer he gives, he helps write the name Vickystown into the official record of Tulare County's gang landscape. In Kings County, the story plays out in smaller towns like Hanford and Lemoore. You've got kids who go to school together, work the same fields or warehouses, live in the same handful of apartment complexes. Norteños and Sureños are present in roughly equal numbers in some schools, tipping the balance back and forth depending on who gets locked up, who gets killed, who moves away. VST is one of several Sureño names you'll see there, sometimes as its own set, sometimes as part of a roll call with other Sur cliques. Videos and photos from that era show youngsters in Kings County throwing up VST13, wearing blue bandanas, and referencing both the 559 and Los Angeles in their captions. And just like in Stockton and San Jose, prison ties everything together. When a kid from Vickystown in Tulare or Kings County hits a place like Wasco State Prison, he's no longer just a farm town gang member. He becomes one more surhead on a yard divided along northern and southern lines. Stories circulate of a VST homie from Tulare getting killed in a stabbing at Wasco, hit not by a local rival, but inside the system, by people who used to call themselves his own. By the time he's mentioned in those stories, he doesn't have a last name anymore. He's just a nickname, an initial, a cautionary tale passed down to the next wave of kids coming up. While all that is happening in California, Vickystown is also spreading beyond the state's borders. One of the loudest signals comes out of Las Vegas. By the late 2000s, Las Vegas is already full of transplanted Californians, people chasing casino jobs, construction work, cheaper housing, and, along with them, California gangs that bring their names, their politics, and their beefs to the desert. Among them is a Vickystown set on the east side of the valley. On March 14th, 2009, a 21-year-old named Armando Castro is taken to a house near the intersection of Pecos Road and Washington Avenue. The idea, at least from his perspective, is that he's going to be jumped into a gang. The ritual is familiar in the Sur world. Stand in the middle, take a beating for a set number of seconds, walk out as an official member. In his case, the number is 13. Inside the house, men surround him and start the clock. They punch, kick, and stomp him, a circle of fists and boots connecting with his body and head. Somewhere in that chaos, the line between initiation and assault gets crossed, and then crossed again. When it stops, he's not just bruised, he's critically injured. Castro dies days later at Valley Hospital. The coroner rules it a homicide. 4 men are eventually charged in connection with his death: Dwayne Romero, Edgar Ginez, Xavier Gonzalez, and Jacob Hoffman. They're described in court and in news reports as reputed members of Vicky's Town, a gang linked to the Sureños in Las Vegas. Investigators say the beating lasted the traditional 13 seconds, but the force and targeting, especially of Castro's head, made it lethal. The details spill out in court. One of the defendants had a VST tattoo. Another was said to have bragged about putting Castro on the set. The video of the beating, reportedly recorded and at one point posted online, becomes key evidence. What was supposed to make Castro a member ends up being used to convict the ones who stood around him and watched him die. In that moment, the same initiation ritual kids grow up hearing about in EastLA, Stockton, and San Jose becomes a death sentence in Las Vegas. And once again, the name at the center of it is Vicky's Town. South of the border, the story takes another turn. For decades, migration flowed mostly one way, from small Mexican towns into California barrios. Now you start to see a reverse flow: deportees, returnees, and younger relatives going back to Mexico, bringing their American gang identities with them. In the state of Oaxaca, especially in and around Oaxaca City, you start seeing graffiti that looks like it could be straight out of LA. Block letters, roll calls, the number 13, 3-dot triangles. Mixed into that are tags reading Vicky's Town, VST 13 951. Some of those walls include shoutouts to Central Valley and Northern California. You'll see references to Tulare County, Hanford, or Stockton embedded inside Oaxacan graffiti. In the comments section of photos that document these tags, people identify themselves as Vicky's Town Gang Cyclones Clique, Tulare County, Centro Valley, linking the Mexican graffiti directly back to Central California. In that world, another layer of origin mythology grows. There's a place in Oaxaca known as Pueblo Victoria, and some locals claim that's where Vicky's Town really began, that the gang is named after their town, not after an EastLA restaurant. They point to the Oaxacan graffiti, to the 951 area code, to the fact that so many VST members in the States trace their roots to Oaxacan villages. But when you line up all the available evidence and testimonies, a different picture emerges. Former members like Henry Ortiz are clear. The gang was founded in East Los Angeles, near the Vicky's restaurant that gave it its name. It spread north to Stockton and San Jose, and then south to Oaxaca through family and migration chains. The Mexican branches adopted and remixed that identity, sometimes leaning so hard into the Mexican side that the American origin gets blurred or even inverted. If you're a kid in Oaxaca City today, seeing VST on walls might mean you're looking at a symbol from your older cousin in California, or it might mean you're being recruited into a local crew that took its name from a story that started decades ago in Boyle Heights. In either case, the name Vicky's Town is no longer just about one restaurant. It's become shorthand for a transnational sur identity. One foot in Mexico, one in the US, with kids on both sides caught in the same cycles of violence and incarceration. Finally, there are the smaller, less documented outposts. Law enforcement lists and online discussions mention Vicky's Town in places like Norwalk, Sacramento, and Manteca. You'll see a line like Vicky's Town, Norwalk, California, Hispanic Gang, buried inside a larger PDF, or a throwaway comment from someone saying they met a homie from VST in a Sacramento unit or a Washington State facility. Your insider message talks about the names surfacing in North Carolina, South Carolina, Washington State, and other scattered spots. Those claims are harder to verify on paper, but they fit a larger pattern. When families move, chasing work, running from warrants, trying to escape old beefs, they don't leave their identities behind. A kid whose dad grew up in Boyle Heights, or whose uncle was from VST in Stockton, might start writing those same letters on a wall 2,000 miles away, in a Carolina trailer park, or a low-rent Washington apartment complex. In that way, Vicky's Town becomes a ghost gang in certain places. Maybe there are only 3 or 4 guys using the name, maybe there's no defined structure, but the letters are there, the tattoos are there, the stories are there, and for them, that's enough to claim it. So where does that leave Vicky's Town today? If you walk those original streets in Boyle Heights now, you'll still see KAM tagged on walls, still see Hazard and White Fence and other older barrios carved into the landscape. VST isn't as visible there as it was in the 80s and 90s. The KAM war and the passage of time really did shrink that turf and scatter its people. At the same time, you can't say the hood is gone, because the name never died. It's etched into the murder case of a 16-year-old in Stockton. It's on the prison paperwork of men from San Jose, Tulare, and Kings County pulled into the Norteño-Sureño Wars inside California's institutions. It's in the Las Vegas court transcripts about a 21-year-old beaten to death in the middle of what was supposed to be his initiation. It's painted on walls in Oaxaca, right next to the names of streets and colonias thousands of miles away from East 1st Street. Some of the people who once proudly claimed VST are dead, killed in drive-bys, in stabbings, in overdoses. Others are still in prison, doing long terms for murders and shootings that started with simple decisions. Get in the car, go look for someone, pick a side. Still others, like Henry Ortiz and even Rocky Rontal, have tried to flip their stories into something different, working with at-risk youth, speaking in schools, trying to convince the next generation not to romanticize the gang life that cost them their friends, their freedom, and decades of their lives. If there's any lesson in the long, scattered history of Vicky's Town, it's that a gang can start from something as ordinary as a small restaurant that lets kids hang out. A corner, a diner, a nickname. That's all it takes.
From there, everything else is choices. Who you roll with, who you fight, who you listen to when you walk away. And for the kids who made those choices under the banner of Vicky's Town, from Boyle Heights to Stockton, from San Jose to Tulare, from Las Vegas to Oaxaca, the cost of those choices is written all over the map. Written all over the map. Written all over the map. Written all over